Want to save a truckload? Get a Peterbilt 579 from Brandt with payments as low as $3,500 a month. Get the same low rates for your choice of contract length, 3, 4, or 5 years, and you can buy or walk when the contract ends. It's the only payment plan that puts you in the driver's seat. You could say it's a big rig deal. Drive to your Brandt Peterbilt dealer to save a truckload while quantities last.
Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Paranormal Guys Inc. Radio. I'm your host, Jason Pepper. And tonight we have a great show. It's sort of a redo show, but it's going to be a great show nonetheless. And my guest will be Jason Martell, Planet X and Ancient Civilization researcher and expert. And we'll get him on shortly. But before I do that, I just want to direct everyone's attention that's listening to please find either on YouTube or now public or any source that you can James Fox's videos that he's done from the BP oil spill. I wrote an article about it, and he's really putting his neck out there along with other people that are in his crew to get real footage that they're not showing on standard media, TV, or mainstream media. Definitely take a look at that. It's well worth it, and you'll really see what's going on. And you can find it on Facebook as well in the Paranormal Guys Inc. group. Speaking of which, it sort of took a bit of a hit. Number-wise, it went down a bit. I don't know what for, but I'm glad, and I appreciate each and every one of you that are in that group. I do this because of you mostly, you know, and everyone else that's on YouTube and MySpace and Twitter that support the cause. Appreciate it, and I hope that you enjoy tonight's show. I think it's going to be fantastic, and just waiting for Jason to call in and get right into it. For those that might not know what Planet X is, basically it's a planet that gets near Earth orbit or in the vicinity, and some people feel that there's alien species that live within this planet, and they've visited us many a time, and the Sumerian texts or tablets are based on their knowledge and wisdom passed to humans, and some other very interesting stuff, but you'll definitely get the full spectrum of what it is all about from Jason as soon as he calls in. Let me go into detail about that article once again. I'll give you the direct link. It's a six-part series that he's done. I wrote an article with 4 of the 6, and it's very hard hitting. One of the videos, he actually speaks to people from New Orleans, and you could see how angry they are and frustrated with the whole thing, and I'm sure they're not the only ones, because all the Gulf states are being hit by this. And, you know, you watch your local news channels or the big ones, such as CNN, and you only see what they're feeding you. And they're doing what they can, I suppose, but much more needs to be done. And it's a sad situation, and it's only going to get worse, especially with the estimated amount of crude oil leaking into the ocean, going up, doubling, tripling in numbers every day, new estimates. It's out of this world. And speaking out of this world, I believe Jason's on the line now, so we'll bring him in. Hello, Jason, are you there?
Yes, I am here. Hello.
Great to have you on the show. It's an absolute honor. I know you're another one of those guests that I've been sort of chasing down, you know, trying to get you on, but I'm so glad that you actually made it, because to me this is an extremely interesting topic, and there are countless people out there that are totally into this whole Planet X Nibiru sort of thing, and I want to find out from you, because you've been pretty much in this for 15 plus years. What was the tipping point that really set you off on the direction and the path that you're on now?
Well, thank you, Jason, and I appreciate you having me on your show, and I'm sorry we missed our first meeting, and glad we're able to finally sync up. How I first got started in my research, it was, I'm 36 now, so when I was around 20, 21 in college, someone had mentioned to me that there was a face and pyramids on the surface of Mars in a region called Cydonia. Having no knowledge of ufology or extraterrestrial archaeology or anything along those lines, I simply dismissed this, as hearsay and really did not think much of it. When someone then showed me some photos, it really piqued my interest. And I was attending college in San Diego and learned that the person in charge of the camera equipment we put on our orbiters that go to Mars, his name was Dr. Mike Malin. Coincidentally, Malin Space Science Systems is also located in San Diego, where I was attending college. So as the principal scientist for the orbiters we've been sending to Mars for the last decade or so, Mars Global Surveyor, Odyssey, Themis, several that we've been sending, all the camera equipment is controlled from Malin Space Science Systems. So I contacted Dr. Mike Malin and said, listen, I'm just a college student, a layman, have really no scientific understanding of satellite telemetry, but to me this looks like a face in a pyramid on the surface of Mars. What's your comment? He said, well, there's nothing to see here, nothing artificial. It's just sand and weathery eroded objects, nothing, out of the ordinary. And so that really piqued my interest, and I was able to find 5 to 10 peer-level review scientists, people who had PhD credentials in image analysis, might not work at NASA, but had published data about this region in Cydonia where the face and pyramids are that showed that it did merit further study. Let me give you an example. An imaging specialist by the name of Dr. Mark Carlotto used mathematical algorithms on Russian satellite telemetry, photos of Russia taken from space, that showed using these algorithms that, oh, look, those are actually tanks and troops being hidden by shrubbery or hidden by a tarp. Using these same mathematical algorithms on the satellite telemetry from Mars, the face and pyramids returned over a 98% probability of being artificial. So NASA never did publicly. NASA never introduced any type of scrutiny about this information to the level that it deserved. So that, Jason, is what really sparked my interest in going, okay, well, wait a minute. Here I am looking at another planet. There's anomalous structures. We have things all over the Earth, megalithic monuments that go back thousands of years before our recorded history, and we can't quite explain them. Machu Picchu, Tiwanaku, Giza, Nazca. There's a huge list of these places where what I've started to come to realize, and we'll touch on some of these specific cultures because they really do stand out with their technology, but they're thousands of years from our past. What I've started to realize is everyone's heard of this idea of an Atlantis, that there was some great technologically advanced culture here on Earth 10, maybe 15,000 years ago, but they lived on this mythical continent, and it somehow has sunk into the ocean, and we can't find them anymore. What makes more sense to me is that if there ever was a highly advanced technological civilization here on Earth, predating us, of course, then they would be a global civilization. Evidence of their society would be on every continent. And it turns out we have megalithic monuments built in stone in ways that we cannot replicate today from 10 to 15,000 years ago. So it's a very interesting thing to look at our history and wonder what has happened in the past and try and more accurately paint a picture of what's happened to hopefully shed some light in what might happen to us in the future.
That's absolutely right, and there's even things that seem to open your mind at least to the possibilities of universal knowledge being passed on. For example, the Dogon tribe in Africa. I mean, they knew.
Yeah, the Dogon.
Yeah, Dogon. They basically knew, stellar mapping, and positions of binary star systems far before anybody else ever did. And I know they don't have the megalith monuments that you were speaking of, but just the general knowledge passed down is extremely valuable.
Yes, it is, and that's a great reference that they were able to cite a very specific star constellation accurately and have this information passed down to the point where we can now confirm its validity. And there's many cultures that this is the overriding theme. I mean, it's been very clear for me, which is all these ancient cultures from our past speak of a time when their gods visited them. And they never say that their gods came across the lake or from the seas or from the mountains. They came from the skies. And so they've gone to great lengths to explain to us this interaction that's taken place in our past. The unfortunate problem we suffer today is academia looks at all this information as mythology. They're trying to explain their place in the universe. Well, they went to great lengths, it seems, to explain things that they might not fully understood, but were clearly witnessing. And let me give you another example. If ancient man was seeing aliens, visiting them, extraterrestrials that maybe even look like us, but are more technologically, as probably as well as spiritually more advanced, ancient man had no understanding that these were aliens and just simply called them gods. We see something familiar happening in more recent times with a term called cargo cults, which simply means in World War II and in World War I, when American troops first started to fly over southern parts of Australia and in Africa, where these Aboriginal tribes had never really been introduced to the white man or technology specifically, these soldiers hop out of their plane, light up a cigarette, and hold up a voice recorder to the Aborigine and record his voice and play it back to him. And the Aborigine can't understand what has just happened. They don't understand technology. And so they start to scrape away runways and make straw models of these prop planes and worship them because they think that they're living beings. And at some point, there would be these drop shipments that would, the troops would receive from planes, shipping them in supplies, and these packages would sometimes fall off course and would land in the middle of a tribe. They crack it open, and it's got canned food and weapons. It's like gifts from the gods, hence the term cargo cult. They got so used to getting these shipments and this advanced technology from these cultures. So it's a very interesting pattern of how the Aboriginal people reacted to modern-day culture is a very similar backdrop to see how it could have played out thousands of years ago, ancient man, being visited by beings more spiritually and technologically advanced, the term ancient astronauts.
You're absolutely right, and we would look at extraterrestrials, say, for example, the Greys and a flying saucer. If it hovered over, say, for in a movie reference like Independence Day, humanity would be worshiping this ship, just the same way as these Aboriginals worship the aircraft that you described. So it totally relates to so many stages, and it's almost like a intergalactic pecking order, would you say?
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, everything seems to be a chain, and tonight what I'd like to do is discuss some of the information that I've learned along my way, specifically about the most ancient culture. But let me say one quick point about the pecking order. I usually say this to the end of my speech, but it's a good time to bring it up along that reference. I think the pecking order is actually very interesting, Jason. I, as an example, have 4 pets. I have an iguana, a little parrot, and a couple of turtles. Now, comparison to me, they're extremely small, and I'm much more intelligent than they are. They must look at me as like, wow, there's this huge being that always loves us and gives us food and takes care of us. He sometimes goes away, but I know that he's always there for me. Now, human beings don't have that connection with anything above us. However, everything in our past tells us, yes, we did. And something I know internally for me, because I'm stepping outside of my research and speaking personally now, something inside of me has always told me, yes, there's something larger and greater that I feel connected to, whether I want to call that God or the Father of all creation, which I like as a simple term for God, Father of all creation. I firmly believe that there's got to be a pecking order, and I think that that's been disrupted, and I hope that in our lifetimes, me being 36, I would really like to feel that connection with something more spiritually, as far as length of time and knowledge being around, as well as technologically advanced. I think it would be very cool to be exposed to something that would make me feel awe of going, wow, there is a pecking order, as you put it there. So
yeah, you know what, you make some really key points there, and perhaps that's what's meant to happen. Maybe these godlike creatures had to step away, from face-to-face contact to make us realize what we've lost. That old adage, you don't know what you have until you lost it.
Right. Well,
maybe that's what's happening, and now they're going to reunite us, and we'll appreciate them that much more.
That would sure be nice. And the genesis of what I'd like to discuss tonight is the actual looking for ancestors of ours that are actually of non-human origin, and doing it from a scientific perspective, not like, ooh, are there aliens? So really what I'd like to divulge into with your audience tonight is the path of research that I've taken on as a personal discovery into using modern science to confirm ancient knowledge. Yeah. So really, when I started to become fascinated with the megalithic structures all over the earth, that led me to the question of, okay, well, where do we come from? What's the oldest civilization that we have record of on Earth? Now, stepping outside of like ancient Vedic texts and things that go back like 10,000 years, the first recorded complete civilization on the books of history for us shows up in southern Iraq 6,000 years ago as Sumer, the Sumerian culture. And preceding cultures from that, many people are familiar with. The Babylonian culture, the Mesopotamian culture, that turned into modern-day southern Iraq, that fertile strip of land between the Tigris and Euphrates River. So what's really interesting about the Sumerian culture is that they have left us records and artifacts that confirm that their civilization has created over 100 of the firsts needed for a high civilization. So right out of the Stone Age, 6,000 years ago, the Sumerian culture shows up in southern Iraq, and they were the inventors of such things as agriculture, writing, mathematics, astronomy, astrology, systems of courts and laws and judges, school and education. All of these, unbelievably complex, sprung up right out of the Sumerian culture 6,000 years ago. They were the first ones to have a written language. Now, their language was called cuneiform script, and they recorded it in wet clay and then would fire up these clay tablets in a stove, literally keying that phrase, writing in stone. Now, their alphabet consisted of over 400 characters called cuneiform script. So pretty interesting that the first alphabet has 400 characters, and we dwindled it down to 26 somehow. Very complex system of writing. And what they did in conjunction with writing is they created pictures that were associated with these texts. And it was a very interesting way as to how they created these pictures in the clay. They had what were called cylinder seals. They were like a round stone that would have the reverse carving of a picture in the stone. And so when you roll it over wet clay, it leaves the positive imprint. So they had an ancient way of like having a printing press where they could easily disseminate pictures and documents throughout the village, or the town. Now what's really interesting about the Sumerian culture is not only did they record their daily lives of transactions and knowledge, but they had a wealth of information that included knowledge of when they interacted with their living gods that they said lived amongst them. And what was very interesting to scholars about this Sumerian culture, where we'll start to get into the facts now, is the fact that some of these texts that they found written in stone that are, again, 6,000 years old, and we'll talk about that date for a second, have parallel versions to our modern biblical tales recorded in the King James Version Genesis as well as the Old Testament. Biblical parallels found in a stone version, 6,000 years old. So that people understand, it's 2010. So we're roughly 2,000 years removed from BC to AD. And that's the time of when Jesus was here, 2,000 years ago. Now, if you step back another 2,000 years from that point, you're at the God of Abraham, the Jewish God in Exodus. Go back another 2,000 years from that point, and that's what we're talking about tonight, the Sumerian culture. So, British archaeologists in the early 1900s started doing excavations in Iraq, discovered these tablets in stone written in a cuneiform script derivative called Akkadian, basically just like cuneiform script, but a little more up to date. Right. And they were amazed. There was an assistant curator to the British Museum named George Smith, who, upon translating one of the tablets, threw his hands up in the air and freaked out, saying, "Oh my God, it was a complete replicated story of the Noah's Ark tale, but 4,000 years earlier than the story of Noah being here on Earth. It was a Sumerian man chosen by a Sumerian god, and they called these gods Anunnaki. And the term Anunnaki meant those who from heaven come to Earth. And it's still on display today in the British Museum as the Flood Tablet. So what we'll discuss tonight, Jason, is that there are several tablets and artifacts on display in museums around the world that are the original source of many of our modern-day biblical tales. The kicker of this information is the Sumerians recorded this interaction with their living gods and gave a lot more specific information about these beings and the planet from within our own solar system from which they come from, Planet X.
That's right. And the Planet X also had a title given to it. Is that part of the research as well, or was that a name that was sort of coined? Hello? Hello? Jason, can you hear me? Hello? It appears we've been disconnected temporarily. Hopefully this will resolve itself. Quite bizarre here. One second, everybody. Okay. Unusual to have that happen. Maybe he was calling from a cell and a possibly low battery, but give me 1 second, please. Okay, I just sent him a message, so hopefully he'll call back in. Just when the conversation was getting really good, too. Just a temporary tech issue. Bear with me. Okay, he's back, and...
Hey, Jason.
Hello, Jason. How are you?
Hello. Forgive me, that was my fault, dropping off the air. I have been having some weird anomalous problem with my iPhone where the sound goes out, so I really hope that doesn't happen again, but if it does, rest assured I will call right back.
No problem, sir. Thank you so much for calling back.
Okay, so I think I took a breather there in discussing what we're going to talk about tonight about the Sumerian artifacts and the Anunnaki coming from Planet X. So please feel free to make a comment or two there.
I kind of dropped a question in there for the name Nibiru. Was that a name that was found through research, or is that just a name that has been put together by, outside groups or individuals?
The term Nibiru is a Sumerian term that meant planet of the crossing, and that is an actual term that the Sumerians used to describe the planet from where the Anunnaki came from. Mm-hmm. Now, why this is a very interesting piece of information is that this planet is what caused the Great Flood. There's a longer tale than what we have in Genesis in describing the Noah's Ark tale, that they knew about this flood and chose not to save mankind. Well, the Sumerian version is called Enuma Elish, and there is a much longer version of this tale described on 11 tablets which explains why there was a great flood, and it's because Nibiru, the home world of the Anunnaki, which is a part of our solar system, comes into the inner part of our solar system every 3,600 years. And we'll discuss all this in a minute. I'm going rather quickly tonight because we have a short amount of time. The term Nibiru stood for this planet, and when this planet came into the inner part of the solar system, in the past it has caused great havoc, such as a great flood. So the Sumerians actually had cylinder seals, these imprints left in wet clay, then turned into stone, which described and talked about Nibiru, to the sense that in one of these tablets, which I have a replicated shot of from the British Museum, it shows a man plowing a field, and he's holding his eye to shadow it as he looks up in the sky at two glowing objects. One is the sun, and one is a glowing cross, clearly visible in the daylight.
Right.
So the Sumerian term for Nibiru meant planet of the crossing, and they symbolized this planet as a glowing cross in the sky, which is another interesting thing, that they symbolize the home world of their gods as a glowing cross 4,000 years before Jesus.
Yes. These are
so,
all,
yes, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say these are all key moments and key points that, as you said, are in many times referenced throughout the modern day and King James Bible. And for those out there, there are going to be some that will be sort of taken back or possibly even offended by the references and comparisons, but it's part of the research, so I just wanted to let you know that.
Hopefully they would not be offended, but I understand why you say that. Let me point out that I was raised as a Christian, and that everything that I've learned now, and I understand about the Anunnaki, if the Anunnaki did create us in their image and after their likeness, for reasons which hopefully we'll get into tonight, that doesn't mean that they are gods. It just means that they're gods with the small g, meaning somebody had to create them too. And they discuss this, and they do believe in a monolithic being, which they simply call the Father of all creation. And I like that term. It's very simple.
Yes. It is.
But the Sumerian legacy of information does penetrate very deep into our society. And let me give you some examples. The Sumerians say that the Anunnaki came from another planet within our solar system called Nibiru. And the Sumerians had unbelievably accurate astronomical information. They tracked the movement of the planets over hundreds of years. And there were high priests that could interpret this information and pass this information down as sacred information. And they would know specifically, as an example, 50 years in advance on what day there would fall a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse. So some of the other information that our scholars have been able to look at and not have an answer for is they knew the distance between the outer planets. They knew the colors of the outer planets. We didn't know what the color of the outer planets looked like until the late 70s and early 80s, when they sent Voyager and Galileo out there to take color pictures of Pluto and Neptune and Uranus, and it turns out they matched the Sumerian descriptions of being mosh sieg, bluish-green. So the Sumerians describe a solar system with 12 planets. They count the 9 planets that we know of, our sun, our moon, and then an additional planet as the 12th planet, Nibiru, the home world of the Anunnaki. So some very interesting things come around their system of time and math that they've left us. Like I just mentioned, they came from the 12th planet. Now, they called Earth the 7th planet. 7 days in the week, the sacred number 7. Very interesting thing that they called Earth the 7th planet, not the third rock from the sun like the cool hip TV show. Mm-hmm. Because if you're traveling from outside of our solar system coming in, meaning you start beyond Pluto and you work your way in, you're going to first pass Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars number 6, and Earth is the 7th planet. So they've left us a system of information that we still use today, which is very intriguing. What we just talked about is that the gods come from the 12th planet. Well, What about the 12 Greek Olympians, the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 disciples of Jesus, or 12 hours in a day, 12 inches in a foot, 12 in a dozen, 12 months in a year? All of these are derivatives from the Sumerian information of the first base mathematical system of 6 and 10. It was a sexagesimal system of 6 and 10, two separate numbers. They were the first ones to divide the heavens into 12 parts. The zodiacal symbol of saying, each of these symbols represent a certain area of the heavens. So some very esoteric information that's been passed down from this culture to us, still used today.
And it's reminds me a lot of paganism, because it's absorbed into our society, but the roots and the heritage of it are sort of buried or not even spoken of in many cases.
Well, that's a good way to put it, Jason. It has been deeply rooted and filtered in pieces of it where it's been very disconnected. And the best way I describe it as is the telephone game. Yeah. So if I told you that God's coming, and then that gets passed around to 5,000 different people and sent back to you, it's now God is coming with blue hair and a green spaceship. Same message, slightly different. So what we've seen from the Sumerian information is a base of knowledge that we can now scientifically confirm the veracity of what they're saying. The academia draws a line in the dirt, however, when they say they were interacting with extraterrestrials. So what we do, as myself and others who look at this information to say, no, it wasn't mythology, they went to great lengths and had great verifiable data about everything else they discuss. However, when it talks about this interaction with these beings, since we can't put a hand on an Anunnaki or we can't understand what they are and don't see them, modern academia doesn't accept this information. But I'd like to dive into some more of the pieces of information they've left us to further verify how is it possible they knew all this. And if you were to ask the Sumerian man, how do you know all that you know? They simply state, all that we know, we were taught by the Anunnaki. Mm-hmm. Now, some of the tablets that were revealed show some very interesting information. One of my favorites, which is stored on my site, xfax.com, and if you just simply Google my name, Jason Martell, or Sumerian artifacts, you'll find these tablets. One of the tablets is very interesting. It basically has two Sumerian men or one Sumerian priest leading another Sumerian to one of these Anunnaki who's seated, and the Anunnaki is reaching out with the plow, and it's symbolically the first agriculture where the gods have shown us how to do agriculture. Now, what's interesting about this tablet is that just as a simple backdrop to the tablet, in the background of what you see here in this print, it's our complete solar system. All the planets that we know of in their correct sizes and position. And most importantly, the sun is placed in the center of this diagram. Now, we didn't know that the sun was in the center of our solar system until recent times like Copernicus and Galileo, where we used mathematics and the telescope to determine we're actually orbiting the sun. Here it is on a stone tablet 4,500 years ago, being accurately depicted by the Sumerians. How did they know this?
Yeah, incredible.
And so there are many of these tablets that parallel modern tales of information that really start to raise the eyebrow. And one of those, which I'd like to talk about tonight, is the Adam and Eve story. Yeah. They have some very specific pieces of information where they talk about these beings, the Anunnaki, who came to Earth 300,000, 400,000 years ago and were mining gold to repair their planet's dwindling atmosphere. So the Anunnaki simply stated to the Sumerians, and they wrote all this down. All this is recorded. There's the Lost Book of Enki. There's only a couple of scholars who have written very extensively about the Sumerians, and one of those is Zacharias Sitchin. Yeah. So that people understand there are only about 200 scholars in the world that can directly translate cuneiform script. So some of this information that comes out about the Anunnaki is why they originally came here and how they created man. And it simply states that they came here to mine gold, and found large veins of gold in southern Africa and started to mine the gold physically, the Anunnaki using the machines and going deep into the mines, and it was a great toll, and they didn't like doing it. And they started to complain to the other Anunnaki, saying, hey, this is crap. Why are we having to do all this hard labor? We're smart. Let's engineer a being to do the work for us. There was already a pre-hominoid man evolving here naturally, the Australopithecine, or just, ape man, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
So what they did was they said, let's take 80% of our gene and 20% of the gene here on Earth found naturally, and we'll create a new being in our image and after our likeness, but we'll dumb him down and make him a worker and have him mine the gold for us. Now, in just saying that alone, it's very interesting how even today, humans have a very large stake in gold. It's a big deal for us. We stockpile the stuff. Why? Why is it that when a human holds gold, he's like, gold? Maybe it's been like genetically programmed into us to really like the stuff. So very interesting is that they have this tale that goes on to explain that they created a being in their image and after their likeness, creating the base from here, and made it in their image to be this worker race. And this being was created in a story that they go out to explain that there was a trial and error process to create the first working version that they called the atom. Not in Adam as in, hey, how's it going, Adam? Adam as in Adamu, the Hebrew derivative, means worker. And so the first working atom, there is a tale how one of these chief Anunnaki scientists, her name was Ninharsad, went through many experiments to create the first working atom. And in the text, they specifically tell how the first version, the arm didn't function, or the leg didn't work, or the kidney didn't work, until finally they had the perfect working model, and they made a pictogram, a picture, in explaining with this text. And you can see Ninharsad holding up a small being, and in the backdrop you see like jars or cylinders on a shelf. Maybe in vitro fertilization was used, some type of scientific term that we can understand today.
Right.
And so they have very long texts that explain the creation of the atom and what the atom was used for, which was to mine the gold. And they eventually made a derivative of the atom so that it could procreate. And then everything went in directions that they didn't like. And I'm condensing the story now. Yeah. But for reasons that they chose, the Anunnaki decided to leave the planet. Now, there were different Anunnaki, and they all had different people following them, their own clans, and there became rivalries between the Anunnaki, and a war broke out. And at some point, nuclear weapons were used in the past. Zecharia Sitchin actually comments how in the Sinai Peninsula, there is extensively heated glass from the sand. And we asked archaeologists and people who would know about these things, geologists, what could cause this type of glassing of the sand? They say, well, you need volcanic activity. There are no volcanoes in the Sinai Peninsula, only stories of ancient nuclear weapons. And so this leaves another interesting piece of the tale as to why today people worship in churches and people worship statues, is because there was a time when these Anunnaki were here, and the high priests would get all of their sacred information from the Anunnaki. The sacred priests are left in a position of not knowing what to do once all the Anunnaki leave. So they say, let's build statues to replicate the gods, and we'll worship them until they come back. And that's where we've left off to this day, is this form of worship from a time when these beings were amongst us.
That's right. And did you also say, too, that the scientist was a female?
I did, yes, Ninharsad.
Even if for thousands of years ago, for a woman to have that title and status was incredible to think of as well.
Well, remember, what I'm speaking of is an extraterrestrial female, though. She was an Anunnaki. Yeah. So status...
But even to be written about as a female in that era and time, is quite impressive.
Sure. Well, there were several of them. There was another female goddess, an Anunnaki named Ishtar, or Inanna, And she has very interesting tales how she liked to roam the skies of Earth. And she was very beautiful. And she would sometimes persuade men to come up into her sky abode. And this is all written in Sumerian texts. Scholars say it's mythology. It's just made-up stories. She liked to persuade men to come up into her sky abode. And at one point she tried to persuade a king to come aboard, but he was a little smart and said, well, no, because all the men that come aboard your sky abode are never returned. Yes. So there are many tales, and some of them not so complex. Some of them, for instance, along the lines of humor. A simple hymn about marriage. It says, man, for his pleasure, marriage. Upon thinking it over, divorce. and this is 6,000 years ago, recorded in stone. They were the first ones to invent beer. So there's just so many things that they've invented and they've left us. But when it comes to the more esoteric pieces of information having to do with our origins, our creation, modern scholars can't quite put their hands around that yet.
It's incredible, too, because, as you mentioned in the beginning of the show, it sort of branches out into other ancient civilizations, too, but none so much as strong as the Sumerians. I mean, just from what you've described, like I did do some research, but not as extensively as you have done, by no means, but finding this information out, I hope people are taking it in and just opening their minds to the extent of it. Like, it's just, you can't even put words, picture that era, that type of human, and the information that they were given, and to be able to use it at that time is just incredible as well.
Well, we look at the evidence of them using it, Jason, and this is kind of where I'll go in the last 10 or 15 minutes we have of this, show. What's really intrigued me is the fact that there's this astroarchaeology all over the earth, which simply means that there are archaeological sites, there are monuments around the world that have been built and are in alignment with points in the sky. So we have terrestrial built objects that are in alignment with objects in the sky. And the best and well-cased point is the Giza Plateau. Those three pyramids are an exact replica of the Orion constellation. And we know this because using star charting software like Redshift, RedStar, you can go back in time as well as forward in time and know exact positions of the stars in relation to Earth. So that, I could go out and say, hey, look, go out tomorrow night and you're going to be able to see Orion in front of your house. Cool. Well, it turns out, rolling the clock back, at 10,500 BC, the Orion constellation is a terrestrial map emulated by the three pyramids of Giza. They perfectly align. Just slightly offset is the third pyramid, so is Orion. What's also interesting at that point is the Sphinx, which is gazing directly into the east, falls in alignment with the constellation of Leo, which is in the shape of a lion. So at 10,500 BC, we see a very complex terrestrial alignment of the Orion constellation and the Leo constellation using the Sphinx and the pyramids of Giza. And so there's many monuments around the world where this takes place. The Aztecs, the Mayans, their god Kukulkan, the great serpent god that would, on a specific date in September, I think it's September 21st, forgive me if I'm wrong, that there is this alignment with the heavens in such a way that the sun reflects on the pyramid to make the shadow of a serpent, a snake, descending from the top of the pyramid to the ground. What I've also found intriguing, again, is combining modern with ancient knowledge, is that all throughout history there are tales of dragons, or, again, the Mayans and Aztecs calling their god Kukulkan the serpent god. Yep. In modern ufology, we have in Mexico massive amounts of UFOs that have been filmed, which very similar look like a large snake in the sky, or some large band bending and moving that's miles long above our atmosphere. Many, many different videos shot. It's new information that I've been studying with a gentleman named Jaime Musan, who I've partnered with. and he is the lead principal investigator in Mexico, equivalent to our U.S. 60 Minutes. There, he's the lead investigator, and they take UFOs seriously in Mexico. So a lot of interesting correlations can be found when looking at ancient information that's being discussed as God's visiting ancient man, and the correlation of what we have today is aliens and UFOs being reported and cited.
And that's a perfect segue, too, because there is the other side of the Anunnaki, and many people are sort of fearful and nervous that this is the end of end-all, and it's the reptilian sort of genre or belief system. And where do you stand on that? Do you find that to be more of a myth than legend type deal, or what's your opinion on that?
Well, I'm going to answer it in a different way. You know, the topic of ufology is a very broad subject, and there are many people abound with different theories and ideas as to what's going to happen based upon what they've learned possibly has happened. Yeah. And so what I've done, Jason, is my research, what I talk about in your show or when I give a lecture, is based upon artifacts, pieces of evidence, things that are physically available that I basically explain to you by tying together a picture of evidence to say, right, you have to make up your own mind based upon the evidence available. Right. Outside of that, in the 15 years I've been doing research into these topics, I've been very grateful and lucky to come across and be exposed to many different things that form my personal opinion. So my personal opinion is based on this. Yes, there has been a huge cover-up of information regarding UFOs and aliens. The complexity of how deep it goes is something that I think in today's modern society falls on the shoulders of, it's all militarized technology that the Department of Defense and governments that are, you know, keeping tabs on technology license this stuff and have access to things that are literally out of this world. They are not in the public sector yet. And so the whole idea of aliens and us interacting with aliens, it's being very hidden from us for the simple reason, in my opinion, because of the technological advances that would take place instantaneously if it was released in the public sector. So they keep very, very high tabs on this, meaning if someone says, well, why isn't there an alien or a UFO that gets brought out into the open or shown on TV? Because that's advanced technology, and nothing like that would be released. So that's just my opinion. And so the reasons why we don't see anything today or where the Anunnaki could have gone, there's a very esoteric blanket of information that someone needs to pierce through in understanding that what's happened in the past has a great effect on today, in that, yes, if that's all been going on for thousands of years, it didn't stop. It's still happening, but the powers that be are controlling how it is we interact with these other beings. And I don't think it's so much that we're the ones not being able to interact with the aliens. Basically, Earth is on quarantine, in my opinion. If we look at what we do to the planet and we do to our own race, other intelligent beings are looking at Earth right now and going, you're not coming off the planet. You're not taking your little weapons and guns and hostility out here and going to mess with us. And if we look at the things that have been happening with space shuttle footage, or when we've landed on the moon, or anyone who actually looks into this stuff deeply, we have been being told for a long time, shape up or we're not going to put up with you. So who knows? If there is some galactic federation of planets, hopefully they're going to be helping us make these decisions on our own to join that table.
Well, there's even control groups within our own race, as you were just saying. You know, for example, there's a lot of sort of underground theories and rumors that one of the main reasons why Iraq was attacked was not just for the oil, but there was that fear that Saddam Hussein was actually trying to raise Babylon once again. And I don't know if that's something that you've ever really looked into yourself. Also, there was...
Yes, I have, actually. There was some very interesting rumors surrounding the time that we first invaded Iraq, and then the second time when we ended his life, simply was that maybe there were monuments that he was hiding in that for archaeological purposes we could not destroy, and he had a great interest in preserving these artifacts and things related to the Anunnaki to possibly create an Anunnaki theme park. So I heard some very interesting pieces of information along those lines. And even to this day, Jason, there are people who listen to Coast AM or who log onto the Internet, and I get emails and contacts from people in the military stationed in Iraq randomly that sometimes provide me with some very interesting insight. As an example, about a year ago, I had some communications with a gentleman who was doing some type of documentation about various Saddam's palaces. And in these palaces were several different wall reliefs where Anunnaki were very intricately painted into these designs with Saddam. And I do have those pictures somewhere on xfax.com. But who knows? You know, his time is now come and gone.
That's right. Well, what about the whole Nazi fascination with the Sumerian culture? I know you must have been asked this a million times, but there's a lot of reference to Indiana Jones and that kind of thing. You know, of course, he's hunting Christian-based artifacts, but if you look beyond that, it would definitely relate to this whole topic here.
You know, I don't know that I can speak to that point related to Indiana Jones. You know, I think the tie-in there would simply be that there's been several things with the Ark of the Covenant and understanding its power source, and kind of, you know, along those lines that would relate down back through the, you know, the Jewish Exodus and, you know, this pillar of light, for instance, that guided the Israelites for 40 years, you know, provided a cloud by day and light by night. Sounds to me like a UFO.
Yes.
So, you know, there are many crossovers, I think, when people review what's happened in the past in religious form and take a scientific approach in analyzing it.
Well, here's another question. I'm not sure if anyone's ever asked this of you. Is there any estimated size or volume of planet X, Nibiru, in relation to the moon or the Earth itself?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. Yeah, it's estimated to be 4 to 8 times the size of Earth. And this is based upon information that they've left in diagrams as well as written text.
And would it be a water-based planet? Is there any written works on the actual type of planet it is? Because I know you said they were, you know, using gold to repair their atmosphere. And I wonder if there's a tie-in to humans attempting to repair our atmosphere with chemtrails.
I've been asked that before, and I don't know. To answer the first part, Nibiru is described as being a very mountainous planet, and it does have oceans. However, the oceans are much deeper than the land, and that's some of the interesting pieces of information that, again, cross over to scientific explanations as to how life arose on Earth whole and complete, meaning there wasn't enough time for life to evolve here naturally. To create an organism that takes in minerals and nutrients and then expels them as waste, you're talking about a tornado going through a junkyard and correctly assembling a 747. Not going to happen. So the new theory is called directed panspermia, that somehow life was put here or directed to evolve here. And so that's a very interesting theory when we look at the already advanced life forms that were on Nibiru, and that water, when there was this great interaction in the past with our planet, that those waters crossed to us. And we left out a big piece of information in this story tonight about the creation of our solar system and the asteroid belt and how that ties in with our past with Planet X and Earth. Maybe that'll be for a future show.
I would love to extend it if you could possibly hang on for a while, or we can definitely get another show as soon as possible, because this conversation is, pardon the fun, but it's off the hook, you know. Absolutely.
It would be great to do another show. I unfortunately I'm already off location, as you can hear background noise here.
Yes, no problem. We're down to 3 minutes left. If we can just go over a few minutes past the hour, because I'd love for you to give your website out one more time, if you can.
Sure. The website is xfax.com. That's xfacts.com.
And we also have to speak of on the next show that we do, your amazing paranormal app that you have for your media system that you got going on, and your social network as well. Because this is not all you do. You have stuff outside of this as well, and we didn't even touch on that in any way. And I apologize about this, but it seems like an hour would never do justice for a show of this type.
Yes, they do go by fast.
Well, I'll definitely have you back whenever you can. I mean, I know you must have an extremely busy schedule. If you can do it in the next week to 2 weeks, that would definitely be a beautiful segue into part 2, if it's possible.
You got it, Jason. We'll plan on that. We'll plan on the next couple weeks. I'd love to come back on your show.
Thank you so much, Jason. And I know it's short notice, and I know I've been kind of a thorn in your side, but it's been an absolute blast tonight, and I am totally honored that I had this chance to speak with you, and I can't wait for part 2.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure, and I'll talk to you soon.
Have fun tonight, and we'll talk to you soon.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Take care. What an amazing guest, and look forward to part 2. It's definitely going to be another, mind-blowing conversation, and the information that I read, it's nothing compared to what this man knows, and, the things that are possible in this universe and our reality are just absolutely amazing. So I hope everyone found it just as enlightening as I did, and I can't wait for part 2. For everyone that's in the chat room, thank you so much for being there. Everyone on Facebook, thank you for your support once again, and keep in touch and pop in and out of the Facebook group if you can, or I'll post part 2 information as soon as possible, and we'll get this going.